Hey, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the PVP podcast. I'm your host, Giancarlo Carangelo, and today Scott Maderer is joining me to talk a little bit about his experience in the business world and what he does and how he helps people transform their lives. So, Scott, thanks for sitting down with me today.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to our talk.
Yeah, me too. And for the listeners, give us a little insight of who you are and where you come from.
Sure. So I'm a husband. I'm a father. I have a adult son who is successfully out of the house. Yes. He hasn't rebounded yet, at least. So, that's always good, right? He's 22, so
Yeah.
he's still got a little while. I'm a full-time coach. I call myself a
Nice.
stewardship coach. So I help
Right.
folks master their time, talent, and treasure so that they can live out their calling. Going back in time a little bit, how I got here, I actually started my career going into medical research. Did that for a little while, figured out that was really about chasing grant money, decided I didn't want to chase grant money the rest of my life. So I pivoted and became a school teacher. Did
Nice.
that for 16 years, loved it. My wife and I went through some kind of personal stuff that I'll unpack here in a second, but career-wise, just kind of keeping on that track. Eventually, I left teaching. I went into the corporate world, still in education. I went from teaching to testing. My students said I joined the dark side. So I joined a testing company and began to write tests for a living, and pretty quickly was promoted and moved up into an executive position. I did the educational testing for 11 years. And what happened is, back when I was still a school teacher, my wife and I had gone through a financial time where we were having a lot of financial struggles. We weren't communicating because of money. I was suicidal because of finances. Basically, we had more debt than I made in a year as a teacher. I was going to protect her and shield her from it, so I'm not talking to her. She knew I was stressed out, and so she's going to protect me and not talk to me. And anyone who's married knows that not talking to each other is a great solution.
Oh, yeah.
So we're having all those things, not fighting, but literally not talking. And eventually some messaging came into my life and her life that made us kind of turn it around and come back together and look at each other and say, okay, we're either going to do this together and radically change the way we're living our life, or we're going to end up divorced and go down that road. And neither one of us wanted to go down that road. So we radically changed the way we were living our life, radically changed our relationship with money. And as part of that, I transitioned to the corporate world. That was part of that journey. And throughout all of that, what happened is eventually folks started kind of noticing. And I literally had someone come up to me one day and go, "Y'all are weird. Do you think you could help us be weird?" And it's like, yeah, sure, we could figure that out. Sat down, started coaching, first kind of as a ministry and part-time, and then began to educate myself more about what that meant and how to do it. And over time, that coaching business started first part-time and eventually grew to full-time. So I started it back in 2011. Been doing it full-time since 2017. I've had the pleasure of working with over 1,000 clients in 20 countries and 38 states. And I tell everybody the commute and the coffee are both a lot better than when I was working in the corporate world.
Yeah, no, I know. And you know what? That's a great intro. And is so much that we have to talk about, based off that. But I want to touch up upon, what you mentioned about the commute and the coffee and the corporate world, because I was actually just filming an episode earlier, and we were talking about how people get stuck in the corporate world without even realizing they're stuck. Or, as, for example, a teacher or, working an office job or whatever job, they get stuck in that cycle of just life, and they don't, before you know it, days, weeks, months, years pass, and you're so embedded into your routine and, doing the right thing by your family, your loved ones and everything. And a lot of them don't have the courage or, for example, live out their calling or their dream or their ambition. So the fact that you did so and you help other people do so is quite impressive, because the majority of people get stuck, and they stay stuck. And I think the worst part about this is they don't realize that they're stuck.
A lot of times. Yeah.
A lot of times they don't realize that they're stuck. But then there's the small percentage of people that go after their calling that people call crazy, you know what I mean? Or, foolish, or, but very rarely ambitious or courageous, or brave, which is what it takes to go after your calling.
Well, so, yeah, go ahead.
No, go on.
What's interesting too, just to clarify at least my view on it, I do want to separate calling from career. Yeah. Because I think a lot of times we put those two things together and we say, what I do for a living is my calling, and what my calling is what I do for a living. And I actually look at calling as a lot bigger than just the career.
Right.
So my calling shows up in how I'm a guest on this podcast. My
Yeah.
calling shows up in how I'm a dad. My calling shows up in how I'm a husband, how I do volunteer work, whatever, where my career just happens to be what people give me money for,
Yeah.
and whether I'm a W-2 employee, whether I work for myself, really still the same thing in that respect. And for some folks, work at a corporate job, work at a, 9 to 5, a W-2, whatever name you want to give it, it's perfectly fine and
Right.
fuels the rest of their life and everything else. But you're right. For a lot of us, what we do is we live out somebody else's picture of what our life should be like.
Yeah.
That's the trap. That's what gets us stuck, is when we're doing it because, society tells us that, or your mom told you that, or teacher somewhere told you, be the safe way, do it the safe way, just go work a W-2 and you'll be happy. When inside you is this passion to start a business around carpentry or whatever, that's really what you feel called to do, but you stifle that because someone else has convinced you either that you can't do it or that the dream's not real and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And, people will often project their insecurities, their fears, and their doubt on others, right?
Oh.
I mean, how many times, I could tell you growing up, it was go to school, get an education, get a good job,
Right.
get married, have a family. And these are all great things and they work. You know what I mean? They do work, but they have worked maybe back then better than today, considering economic,
Well,
the economy.
average person today goes through 7 jobs by the time they're like in their 30s.
Yeah. And that's it, right? That's it. They change careers every 5 years.
Yep.
The average person, which is a lot of like courage change is great, but it takes a lot of courage,
Yeah. And it's a very different world than when you started at a company and retired at that same company, 65 years later with a gold watch and a pension. That doesn't really exist anymore for most folks, even folks that are working the quote W-2 route.
No, it doesn't exactly. But I feel like, I coach people too in the real estate world. We help them become real estate investors, and a lot of them are, again, it's not necessarily that they want to be moguls or millionaires. Some of them just want to build a better future for their retirement, for their kids. And if that
Right.
means whatever the goals are, to acquire 5 properties instead of 50, you know what I mean? That they could blend in with their W-2 or their 9 to 5, right? But they stay stuck in this like bubble of fear and doubt, thinking it's not possible for them because they don't have the capital that they believe they need to have, or they don't have the knowledge or the connections, or they don't have this or they don't have that. And oftentimes it's what they hear from other people. Right.
And to be fair, a lot of times those people care about them. They're not saying it out of a mean place most of the time, or a malicious place.
No.
They're trying to protect you,
Yeah.
And honestly, a lot of times those inner fears that you have are coming from a place of, I need to protect myself. I need to protect myself. And again, we should be wise in how we do things, to reduce risk and whatever. But there's a difference between being wise and taking a wise risk and not taking a risk that ends up being less wisdom. It's sort of even the act of not deciding is a decision.
Exactly.
Type of thing.
Exactly.
So sometimes taking those small actions, and maybe it's not owning, like you said, 50 different places or 50 different pieces of real estate. Maybe it's not starting your own business. Maybe it is, but it's these ideas of stepping back and going, what actually is important to me? What's the alignment? What are my values? What am I being called to do? And how do I have that show up in my life? Because a lot of times, if you're just living someone else's dream, the things that you really think are important don't show up. And it's that lack of alignment that causes that inner stress. Because I've had folks that'll tell you, most important thing to me is, a lot of people, it's faith, it's family. They tell you the same thing. It's freedom, it's flexibility. These are the things that people tell you are important. And I'm like, great, give me your checkbook, give me your calendar, and I'll tell you whether you're lying.
Yeah.
And
I don't necessarily agree. Like I say it all the time, and I certainly say it to one of my best friends. I say it takes a certain level, a certain special someone, and a certain amount of strength to go into that job
Absolutely.
go into that 9 to 5, that career day in, day out for 10, 15, 20 years. Right. And I respect it and I admire it. But oftentimes what I think is it shouldn't stop you from going after and starting a business or a passion or pursuing something else that, some people pursue passions that turn into extra income and
Hmm.
they still keep their 9 to 5s and they have their stability and they have their venture, and I definitely, I respect those who keep that 9 to 5, but I also understand that you shouldn't just be limited to that. That's where the trap is, right?
Yeah, it's really about deciding and then making that decision and taking action on it, because what I've seen folks do is a billion different ways of making it work. There is
Yeah.
no one path that works
No.
for every person. I wish there was, because it would make it really easy. But when we think about things like look at me, okay? So when I was in the corporate world, really and truly, if you think about it, I was self-employed with one client, the company I worked for,
Yeah.
right? If
Yeah.
they went out of business, if they downsized, if they changed,
That was your book.
bye, and not their fault either, not a
Yeah.
bad thing. It's just the reality. Now I'm a coach and I've got 20, 30, 15, 18, whatever it is, clients. So is that really less secure or more secure?
Right.
Now, the answer is yes, it's both. There are
Yeah.
some things that are more secure about a W-2 job. There are other things that are actually less secure about a W-2 job because you have
Right.
less individual control. You have less flexibility. You have that thing. So it's not really, one is good, the other's bad. It's what are the pros and cons and how can you design it to fit into what you really want? And for some people, that's 100% self-employed. For some people, that's 100% W-2 on the career track. And
Yeah.
for a lot of people, it's some blend of the two. And maybe even at different phases of your life, because when you're a young family with young kids at home and a mortgage and all of this, you may make different decisions than when you're 52 and the kids are out of the house,
Right.
because your reality's different, and that's
Yeah.
okay. It doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. And the reason people stay stuck is they never step back and spend that internal time to really go, what do I want to be when I grow up? What do I want these next 3 years to look like? What is going on in my life, and what do I want to change, and what do I want to keep? What's working well, what's not working, and then begin to take action on those things. Instead, most of us kind of live unintentionally and just sort of go from thing to thing to thing to thing with no real rudder to stick in the water. It's more like you're just drifting with the current.
Yeah. Exactly. And 4 important words that I heard there. What do I want?
Hmm.
Which is words people don't ask. A lot of people ask themselves. They do what's right. They do what society thinks they should. They do what other people thinks they should. And going back to what I was saying earlier about like projecting fear and doubt onto others. Like for example, in my case, how many times I work with people and they say like, I want to get into real estate. And I said, what stopped you? And said, well, when I brought this up to like a cousin or an uncle or a friend, I got this response like, yeah, I did it and I lost X amount of dollars and I would never do it again. Or yes, I did it and I never want to deal with tenants. And, this is what happened to me. They stopped paying, they this, they that. Right. And it kind of just like projects the insecurity and
Hmm.
the doubt onto others. And I've been in real estate 10 years. I could tell you I've had more tenants stop paying than I'd like to admit. But if I would quit because of it, every time something bad happens, or in any business, not even necessarily real estate, it's about mindset. It's about perseverance, resiliency. If I would quit every time I had a bad day, I would be changing careers once a year. You know what I mean? At the very least, maybe
Well,
even once a month, you know?
and some of it's about what are you moving towards versus what are you moving away from?
Right.
Because if moving away from something is a fear-based response, I don't like this, the tenants don't pay, I'm going to quit doing it. That's moving away. Okay. Moving towards something could be, I'm not liking this real estate thing. I want to get out of it. I want to try something different. Okay. But it could also be, what lessons do I need to learn from this so that the next time,
Yeah.
maybe it's a little harder for the tenants to not
Yeah.
pay, or I've set things
Yeah.
up a little different or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's not, because that either way, that's moving towards something, either a better real estate business because you don't know what you don't know. And I mean, that's again where coaches and other people can help you because oftentimes they know things that you don't know, but you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have bad days. I don't care what you're doing. Every job that I've ever had some things about it that just did not enjoy, but I've been lucky in that I've always managed to move from something that I love to something that I loved more.
Yeah.
So it's never been I'm moving from something that I hate to something that I love. I've moved from something that I've truly found the things in there. And some of that's just state of mind and what you're looking at. Are you focusing on the parts of the real estate business, to use that example, that bring you joy and energy and figuring
Yeah.
out how can I get more of that? Or are you focusing on all the stuff that stinks? And,
Yeah.
and therefore it's kind of more fear-based and avoidance-based.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been doing this 10 years. No matter what field you're in, no matter how long you've been doing it, everybody has doubt. Everybody, I'll have a bad day every now and then that'll make me rethink my decisions and doubt myself. You know what I mean? And then there's this thing called imposter syndrome.
Yep.
That no matter who you are and what you do, you've guaranteed experienced it. But if I listen, you know what? If I forget listening, if I believe that doubt and I believe that imposter syndrome, you know what I mean? I'll never really truly have the mindset to push through. So every once in a while I have bad days, terrible days, and I'll be like, I just can't wait to finish today. I'll finish my day. I'll go to bed. I'll wake up, but I don't carry it over into
Right.
the next
It's a
day.
new day.
I wake up with a clear conscience, a clear mindset, you know what I mean? And I get back to that goal,
Mhm.
right? And I get back to that passion, and I get back to that idea. And it's just another day, basically.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's important to build in those resets,
Yeah.
the times that you step back and, when you get up in the morning, when you go to bed at night, naturally, a lot of times people do that around the new year, the January 1st, right? That's why we all have New Year's resolutions. We feel like it's a new beginning. Here's the truth. It doesn't have to be January 1st,
No.
pick a day, and today's a new day,
How many people do you know start something January 1st, by January 15th, they're not even.
I actually was telling a story to a friend of mine the other day. There's a gym right up the road from where I live. And the first 3 weeks of January on Tuesday, so 3 Tuesdays in a row, I happened to drive by that gym on my way to a group meeting, and for the first 3 weeks in January, man, I drove by that gym and I looked over at the parking lot and every parking spot was full. There were cars on the street, it was packed. Week
Yeah.
4,
Empty.
nope. You could have easily found a parking spot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, so 3 weeks, that was it. That's how long it lasted because there wasn't any real systems or processes or habit or, it's just a flash in the pan. I'm going to change. They hadn't really figured out why they wanted to change. They hadn't really put any systems or processes in place. And so what happens is sooner or later you have a bad day.
Yeah.
And if you don't plan for what am I going to do on the day that is bad, the days that are good aren't enough to carry you through because those bad days will drain you. And once you've had 2 bad days in a row, most people quit.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. With that being said, we're going to take a short break from our sponsors and we'll be right back.
Inspections. Mercurio is a trusted and experienced inspection firm known for their thorough, professional approach and attention to detail. They specialize in providing clear, easy-to-understand reports that help buyers, sellers, and investors truly understand the condition of a property before making important decisions. Their commitment to transparency, accuracy, and reliability makes them a valuable partner in any real estate transaction. Our trusted partner since 2018.
All right, guys, welcome back to this episode of the PVP podcast. So, Scott, talk to me a little bit about, you've been in coaching for a while now. Talk to me a little bit about like the clients you work with and the things that you help people with in their life.
Sure. So, like I said, I call myself a stewardship coach. So, short answer, time, talent, and treasures. Most folks that come to me are people of faith of some sort.
Right.
And, that's not a requirement, but stewardship is kind of a faith-based word. And I jokingly say I'm trying to claim the word stewardship back from what it's come to mean in a lot of churches, which is we're starting a building campaign. Would you please give us money? Because that is unfortunately what it's come to mean. But
Yeah.
in that what stewardship really is just an attitude of at the end of the day, you have to manage the resource that you're given, but you have to realize that you're not the owner. So it's an open-handed kind of approach to stuff. And by the way, if you're not religious and that bothers you, I would challenge you to tell me whether you've ever seen a U-Haul following a hearse. Meaning, guess what, folks, religious or not, what you've got doesn't go with you, because at some point, you're passing it on, whether that's to a charity, whether that's to your family, whatever. You're leaving it behind. And so when you realize that, it means our job in part is to take care of those resources, not just for ourselves, but for others.
Yeah.
And when you start turning your mindset towards that, it lets you make different decisions. And so a lot of my clients come to me because they think they've got a problem with their money or their time. They're those folks that you're talking about that feel stuck because they've got that corporate job. A lot of times they feel like they've got golden handcuffs, or they've got too much debt. They've got too much mortgage, this or that, or whatever it is. They just don't have control of their money, or they feel like they're working 80 hours a week and they just have no time to learn what they need to learn, to do what they need to do, to actually do that thing that they dream. And then what we do is actually, I work with them not on time or money, but on talent, because at the end of the day, you don't really manage time. You don't really manage money. What you manage is yourself, and it shows up in your time and money. So when you start making different decisions, your time and money get straight. Ironically, you also start losing weight and all these other unintended benefits, because it's called, when you get disciplined in one area of your life, you get disciplined in other areas of your life, and it starts to pay off. And so that's what I do. So a lot of times they come to me, they're kind of in that corporate job, or they've got something like that, but they're entrepreneurial minded. They've got a dream or a passion. They've been wanting to launch it and they feel stuck around time and money. And then, like I said, we really just help them get out of their own way and figure out a path forward so that they can do that thing, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, it totally, I work in coaching too. And I think that it's always whatever type of coach you are, right? But the logistics of it are all similar. It comes down to, like you said, time or money. And, we think about coaches and we think about everything. They're all, even a fitness influencer, we're all solving the same issue.
Yeah.
There's something that these particular group of people are struggling with, right? And we help them get through that. And this notion of, I don't have time, right?
Yep.
Time, I could tell you that there's not enough time in one day. Okay. Not enough. My to-do list doesn't get emptied. It always, something carries over to the next day. But I could also tell you that I make time for the things that I truly want. And if I have something that I need to achieve, I will make time for it. Whether that's, waking up 2 hours early to get it done, or going to bed 2 hours later because I had to get it done. I'll always make time for it. So I think when it comes to time, for most people, it's a mindset issue.
Usually it's a prioritization issue.
Right.
So like you said, everybody has 24 hours in a day, 168 hours in a week. We could keep going, but what it boils down to is it's the subtle shift between externalizing it, which is, I'm too busy, I don't have time. You hear that?
Right.
How that's an externalization. It's not my fault. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what we say. I mean, busy has become a badge of honor, right? You walk in, how are you doing? I'm busy. That's the answer to that question now. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to be busy. I actually want to be productive.
Yeah.
Which means I'm getting stuff done that matters, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the key when you start shifting it. So one small little shift, people can do this. Literally remove the words, I don't have time for this, from your vocabulary. Just eliminate it. And instead say, this isn't a priority for me right now. Because here's what's funny. You'll make different decisions.
Yeah.
If you're sitting there late at night, you're typing away, you're answering emails, doing your work, doing this, and all of a sudden it pops up that it's time to leave for your daughter's soccer game. And you tell your coworker swings by and goes, man, isn't it time for you to go to your daughter's soccer game? And you go, I'm just too busy. Your coworker's going to feel sorry for you, kind of pat you on the back, commensurate, go, yeah, I get it. I'm too busy too. But if on the other hand, you look at that coworker and you say, it's simply not a priority for me to make it to my daughter's soccer game tonight. first off, you're going to feel icky, for saying that out loud. And secondly, your coworker's probably going to smack you upside the head and go, dude, shut down the computer, go. What are you doing? You can answer that email in a couple of hours. It's not that important. Okay.
Yeah.
And I see it time after time after time. When you recognize that you can prioritize your time, you can make those choices. Now, granted, if you're a doctor and you're in the middle of open heart surgery, yeah, maybe it is more important to finish what you're doing than to go to your daughter's soccer game. But if you're answering an email that you truly can answer in 2 hours, why aren't you going? It's stupid to sit there and not do it. You're sacrificing what's really important for what isn't. And yet we'll do that all the time. We sacrifice stuff that really doesn't matter because we feel like we have to, but it's really just a feeling.
Yeah.
It's not reality. And yet we put ourselves in that box all the time.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. Especially like an email, you could answer it from essentially
A
anywhere.
lot of times you could answer it when you get to the game.
From the soccer game on the cell phone type thing, right? Even just to say how, like, for example, I think on my emails, there's a beautiful feature called schedule send on email. And I'll respond to everything at night and I'll schedule it to go out in the morning.
And
that way I know.
Yeah, it's going.
I got my 30 minutes downtime at night where I could squeeze in some emails. Doesn't necessarily mean it has to go out at night. It could go out at 8 o'clock, 6 o'clock tomorrow morning.
And flipping it the other way, like I tell people also to communicate with people about what you do. So if your pattern is, I read email in the morning and in the afternoon, communicate that with your client, with your boss, with whoever else is depending on you. And so like I used to have in my email signature when I worked corporate, I still have a version of this now. It's just different. I literally had, I check email at this time, and this time, Central Time. Here is my cell phone number. If this is an emergency that can't wait for one of those times, call me. You know what? I didn't get very many phone calls. 99.9% of the time they went, oh, I'm going to get an answer in a couple of hours when he checks email. No big deal.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to be a slave to emails open 24/7. And when I worked corporate, my record was I got 197 emails in an hour one time, so I used to get 1,000 plus emails a day. And yet I maintained inbox zero. I answered every email. I filed every. Why? Because I had a system, I had a process, and I communicated, with the people that needed it. So they knew, hey, if they needed to pick up the phone, they could pick up the phone. But most of the time, they don't need to pick up the phone because it turns out that the email's not that burning. But we put the pressure on ourselves, I've got to answer that email in 30 seconds. Why?
Yeah. And that, at the beginning of my career, I would answer my phone always. On the second ring, I would answer my phone. I would even answer late at night, 7, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., thinking I'm doing justice to my career. Thinking I'm doing a service to my clients. But what it does is it just trains people that now they expect me to answer at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night.
Right.
And
you've communicated that's the expectation.
Yeah. And now they're calling me and they're, you know what I mean? And they're calling me and they're expecting me to answer and they get upset when I don't, or how come you didn't answer me? Or why didn't you answer my email yesterday? Well, because it was Sunday, or why, and I realized that like I'm doing a terrible thing. I think I'm doing well, like is a good thing is actually really a bad thing.
Yeah.
It
creates a false expectation that you can't maintain forever.
No. And then they kind of, then I started getting calls at 7:30 Sunday night. And let's be honest, in the business world, and there's nothing productive happening 7:30 on a Sunday night. So, you know what I mean? That's reserved for rest and everything. But by creating that, for example, communicating, like now I could tell you now I tell clients, I check my emails first thing in the morning, once at lunch and once in the evening, 3 times. And I don't spend 2 hours on my emails every time I check it, or even an hour. I spend 30 minutes. If I have a lot to answer, spend 30 minutes every time I check it. And they seem to understand, they seem to get it. And it's less strain on me.
Because that's really what people want to know is, when am I going to get an answer?
Yeah.
And again, sometimes there needs to be an alternative method of contacting you if it is an emergency. Again, when I was in corporate, that's had that. My clients today have my cell phone number. And, occasionally something comes up that they're like, hey, I need to bounce this by you. They pick up the phone and call. But
Yeah.
like right now, while we're on this interview, my phone is in a mode that there are basically 6 people on the planet where my phone would ding. If you're not one of those 6 people, it's go to voicemail, and I'll call you back when we're done with the interview because I don't want to be interrupted right now. Or if I'm doing deep work and I'm working on a project, I put my phone in that mode. And there's just a handful of people that I've decided these people are important enough to me that they get to interrupt me during those times. Nobody else gets to interrupt me, But again, it's those boundaries. We have to do the work of making that decision and then taking action on it. And what gets us stuck is both of those, because belief leads to action, which leads to belief. And so what happens is if you believe you have to answer your emails in 30 seconds, or on Sunday night, you have to answer your phone at 7:30 on Sunday. You believe that, so you do it, which then creates the belief not only in you, but in your client. And, it's a feedback loop, and it's a negative feedback loop. Well, if you believe that I can answer all of my emails and do everything I need to do by checking email 3 times a day, guess what? That becomes reality too, So the belief and the action feed back and forth to each other.
Yeah. So I couldn't, agree with you more about creating the belief. And in my personal experience, that's exactly what would happen. At the beginning, I was so eager to service these clients.
Mhm.
And at the beginning, I was so, anxious, and I thought I was doing a justice, and it just backfired on me because then they started to expect me to do it. But then it came to a point where I realized this is not bearable. I can't operate a business like I can't always be plugged in. I have to create some sort of healthy balance. And ever since I did that, there was just a shift, I say in the way things ran, and they ran much more smoothly. And I felt less overworked and less pressure. And, because if I think about when it comes to emails or even phone calls, actually, in my career, the amount of professionals that don't answer their phone is like, I remember calling somebody on just this year, actually, might have been like the 3rd or the 4th of January. And they called me back like the 10th or the 11th saying, oh yeah, sorry, I just, returning your phone call from 10 days ago. We just got back in from a vacation. And this is how much people are not really pressed, in like my field, at least. And I'm thinking, my phone doesn't ring. If my phone rings and I don't answer, like for example, now that we're filming this podcast, I will call them back within an hour.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And some people, they're so hard to reach in my field, at least,
No, it's true at everybody. And it's a both and, it's not that when it comes to controlling your time, the key isn't what you do. It's, again, in my opinion, it's twofold. One is boundaries and the other is communication. So for instance, using the example that you just did, if they had a out of office voicemail that when you called said, hey, I am out of the office from January 10th to January 3rd to January 10th. I'll get back to you when I get back. You would have gone, okay, I cannot expect a call back between now and January 11th, So it's communication. And then there's boundaries. And I see people err both directions. Some people have boundaries that are too permeable. And this is everyone can contact me 24/7, blah, blah, blah. That could be a problem. By the same token, if you don't have any sort of system and process for like following up with people and communicating with people, well, now all of a sudden you get the reputation of, well, I can't rely on this person because sometimes they call me back in 3 days. Sometimes they call me back in 6 days. Sometimes they never call me back, whatever it is. So it is about setting up realistic systems and processes and tools, but realize the tools are the how, the boundaries and the thought process and the decision making. That's the what and the why, if that makes sense. And it's not the same for everybody. When I'm married now, my son is out of the house. I have things now that I didn't have when he was a senior in high school. Because when he was a senior in high school, I'm going to make it to every one of those games that he's playing. I'm going to make it to every band concert. I'm going to make it because that was it. That was my last chance. I got to make sure I'm there. And it was important to him, and it's important to me, and it's important to his mom. Okay, great. I'm going to do this. But now I don't have band concerts to make it to for him, So it is a matter of recognizing that there isn't one system or process that you can set up that lasts forever. There isn't one set of boundaries that you set that lasts forever, but how you establish those intentionally and then communicate those, that's the key. Because all too often people leave it for people to guess, and or they have no
Yeah.
system and process, and then it's just hit or miss. You
Yeah.
you never know what's going on. They don't know what's going on.
No.
And therefore they can't follow up. They can't, they don't do it. And by the way, professional, personal, doesn't matter. I've got a lot of folks in my circle that I have a professional relationship with, but I also have a personal relationship with. And guess what? If they stand me up for dinner 3 times in a row, when we're supposed to meet, I'm also thinking about them in terms of, I probably don't need to send any clients over to them. I mean, it affects both directions. Our professional life affects our personal reputation. Our personal reputation affects our professional reputation.
100%. And I think how you carry yourself in your personal life also
Absolutely.
translate into your professional life. If you're a disorganized person in your personal life, poor communications, chances are in your professional life, you're going to translate the same behaviors.
Yep.
So I think that, and it comes time earlier, you're talking about the New Year's resolution, January 1st. Well, you know what? If you really want to make a change, you don't need to wait to a new year. You don't need to wait till January 1st.
Tomorrow.
You could change right now, tomorrow, like it doesn't have to be. And oftentimes when you make a decision, like Tony Robbins, I follow Tony Robbins a lot, and he says change isn't difficult. You know what takes time is the decision to make the change.
Yeah, that's actually what holds most people up.
It might take you 5-10 years to make that decision. And then the change comes in, a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year. But what really took time was making the decision.
And I'll prove that to you. I mean, it's a real simple thought exercise. I'm going to use money since we've been talking about time. So I'm going to use money. Imagine for a moment that, most of us feel like we don't have a lot of extra money. I mean, even if we're doing well, most of us feel like we're kind of maxed out, right? We've got a plan for all of our money. We know where it's all going. It's all got something to do. Hopefully some people don't, but let's assume for a minute you do. But if I came to you and I said, you know what, by the end of this year, you've got to save up $30,000, just picking a number at random, for some sort of life-saving medicine that if your child doesn't get that medicine, your child will not live. Or if you don't have a child, make that your spouse, your partner, or you, doesn't matter. Put it into that kind of, and I know that's morbid, but stop and think for a minute. Would you scrape together every penny? Would you change the way you're living? Would you radically cut things out so that you could make that money? Now, what if I said instead of a year, what if I said you had to do it in 6 months or 3 months?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'd work really hard to find a way. You know what I mean? And I'd be willing to do some stuff that, not necessarily, I wouldn't do anything illegal or immoral, but I would take risk and I would push hard and I would try everything I could try, because I had to. So if you could do it in that kind of dramatic situation, you could do it without the drama, And again, it's because it's not, the drama is not what made you do it. The decision is what made you do it. So, and yet all too often what happens is it takes something like that. People come for help a lot of times when they've hit rock bottom. And it's like, honestly, if you'd come before you hit rock bottom, it's so much easier.
Yeah. It's true. It's definitely true though. But I think that, people, they react to this a certain specific scenario. Some unfortunately wait till they hit rock bottom to make that change, and some make it on the way down. You know what I mean? It's just, if you make it on the way down, there's a lot less work, a lot less tedious work that has to be done.
The hole's not as deep, that you have to climb out of.
Exactly. So when you switched from corporate to coaching, was there any sort of hesitation? Was there any sort of like fear, doubt, any of that stuff? Or were you just like had full belief in your vision and yourself?
Well, yes to both of those.
Good.
So here's what I mean. I had no fear or doubt around coaching. A, I'd already been doing it some as a business for myself. B, I really was a coach when I was a school teacher. I was a coach when I was in corporate. my approach to leadership was much more of a coach model than a directive model, tell people what to do. I did a lot of coaching whenever I was in corporate. I did a lot of coaching when I was in the classroom. So I knew I had the skill sets. So there was no doubt there. But at the same time, I'm launching a business. Now, I've run small businesses before. I started my first business when I was 12. So I had entrepreneurial beliefs. My dad was a small business owner, so I grew up seeing him successfully run a small business. So I knew it could be done. But even then, this kind of gets back to that imposter syndrome you were thinking about or talking about earlier. There's still a part of me that's going, yeah, but can you really do it? Maybe this isn't the smartest thing to do. Maybe you should play it safe. Maybe. So it did take me longer. My wife jokingly says that she thought I should have left the corporate job in about 3 years, and it took me 6. She's right.
No,
I probably could
yeah,
have left in 3, but I wanted a little more preparation, a little bit more runway, a little bit more. And some of that's probably wise, and some of that's just fear.
yeah, 100%. I mean, fear is like, if you're in anger, I find are two in the similar things, as in, if you use it to your advantage, it could work to your benefit. But if you don't know how to control it, it works to your disadvantage, which works to, the detriment, right? So I think that learning how to, because we all have fear, everybody's afraid of something, but but it's about controlling it and learning, where you at the end of the day, you can't control external factors, you could control yourself. So I think that, when it comes to like fear, if you learn how to control it, you could work to your advantage. It could be a motivator. It doesn't
The way
have
I
to be
use
like
it
the
is,
roadblock.
the way I use it or frame it, and rather than control it, I actually tell people, learn to dance with fear.
Right.
And what I mean by dance is, how if you've ever had that experience when you're dancing with a partner who you and them are really in sync, it just is effortless. It's just like you move and they move and everything works together. That's kind of what you want to aim for with fear, because it's not that the fear goes away. It's not that you beat it out of existence, but you learn to operate despite that. You learn to welcome the fear in. Like public speaking. I have zero fear of public speaking. And people are like, how can you not be? Everyone's afraid of public speaking. I'm like, no, honestly, when that feeling shows up for me, I label it excitement. It's not fear, it's excitement. I'm excited. And I've really kind of almost psyched myself into believing that. And so I'm still feeling the emotion, but I'm not letting that emotion go back into that kind of negative feedback loop of I'm afraid, so I need to be afraid. And now I'm going to act afraid, which is going to make me feel more afraid. I go, hey, I must feel excited, so I'm going to act excited, which makes me feel more excited. And I walk out on the stage, 5,000 people in the audience, deliver a talk or do what I need to do. It's not that I'm not feeling it though, because people come up and go, how can you not be afraid? It's like, no, I am afraid, but I've reframed that fear into a different relationship with it. So it's not debilitating. It's not making me not be able to operate.
Yeah. I always say, I say it at the gym more than anywhere else, but I say, if you pretend to love it, you'll suffer less.
Yeah. And some of that's just what you're focusing on.
Yeah. If you pretend to love it, you won't suffer.
Our head goes, we go the way our head goes, right? They tell you that in sports, right? Look the way you want to go. If you're throwing a ball, look at where you want the ball to go. If you're running, look where you're running. Don't look down at your feet. Look where you're running. I ran a marathon. They teach you, don't ever look at your feet. Look down the road, because that's what drives us. And it's the same thing with what you pay attention to. If you dwell on, oh, how bad this hurts and I'm sore and blah, blah, and blah. Well, duh, no wonder you don't want to do it. I wouldn't want to do it either. But if you focus on, I know the endorphins are going to release. I know I'm going to feel better after this, and, it's worth it. And, I always feel good that afternoon or the next morning, or find the focus of it that you enjoy and pay attention to that. And that signal gets louder, and yet we forget that we pay attention so often to the negative voices. And again, a lot of times those negative voices they mean well. They're trying to protect us, whether they're internal or external. They mean well, but if you could just turn that and start to pay more attention to the positive voices, you go that direction. And again, don't get me wrong. I am not saying this is easy. I am not saying I succeed at this 100% of the time. I don't think you would say, none of us do this every day, right? There's still mornings I get up and go, my back hurts, my head hurts, whatever. But you know what? You can still kind of get out of bed and get moving. And usually couple hours go by and it's like, yeah, okay, I'm in the rhythm now. It's okay. It's not the end of the world.
Exactly. So, I mean, just to close off the episode, I think I would like to ask, what would be your top piece of advice to somebody who's looking to pursue a goal, an idea, and who's maybe stuck, in that corporate world, in that security, stability, in that fear or that doubt? What would be that one piece of advice that you'd offer them?
There's about 50, but I'll zero in on one. I think one of the most important things is find the helpers, find the cheerleaders, find somebody, and it can be a person, it could be a coach, it could be a mentor, it could be a friend, it could be your spouse. Find somebody that you can confide in that will hold you accountable, but will also cheer you on.
Yeah.
They're not the negative Nancy. I'm not talking about that person, but they're also not Pollyanna. I don't want the person that's just going to go, everything's perfect. And I also don't want the person that says everything sucks. I want the person that goes, okay, that's a tough reality, but what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
And find that person in your life and plug in with them. That's probably the single most important thing I've seen for long-term success is people finding that accountability partner or partners. Sometimes it can come in a mastermind group. It can come from a coach. It can come from friends, family, but find those right people to kind of plug in with and be accountable to.
Yeah, because you are a product of your environment, right?
Every day.
You are a product of your environment. And like they say, if you hang around, four ambitious people, you're going to be the fifth one. If you hang around, four lazy people, you'll be the fifth one. Right?
You'll be the fifth one. It's really true.
Yeah.
And remember, turkeys naturally flock. Eagles don't.
Yeah.
I
love that. I love
so
that.
You got to intentionally find eagles.
Yeah.
Turkeys show up. I don't have to look for them. They're just going to show up, but I got to go find eagles.
Yeah. I mean, Scott, this was a fun chat having with you. I appreciate you coming in. Real quickly though, for anyone who's connecting with you, who could connect to anything you said, how could they get in touch with you?
So I actually put together a landing page just for your listeners. So if they go over to my website, which is inspiredstewardship.com, and then just /Proventure.
Yeah.
What you'll find there's some free resources that folks can plug into. If anything I said resonated, you can find those there. Place you could jump on a quick call with me. I've got a book called Inspired Living, my podcast. All of that is found over at inspiredstewardship.com /Proventure.
Amazing. Well, thanks again for sitting down and having this awesome chat with me. We appreciate it. And for anyone listening, be sure to like, comment, follow, or subscribe wherever you're listening us to. Guys, until next time, see you soon.